Hello, everybody. Oh, sorry, having some technical issues over here. Hi, everybody. Charles from GMAT Ninja. Welcome to episode 4 in our 2026 live reading comprehension series. Today, we're going to talk about function and role questions on reading comprehension. So it's those questions where they say things like, oh, this line was said by the author, was written by the author, most likely in order to blank, or what is the function of the 5th paragraph? There's never 5 paragraphs, but you get the idea. What is the function of this word? What is the function of this sentence? Why did the author mention this thing? What is the function of a paragraph? As always, all of this is rooted in the same reading principles we've been talking about throughout the series. So stay anchored to point of view, really think about that author's purpose every step of the way, and it's going to make everything easier. I think sometimes these role and function questions, they sometimes just kind of feel like another little nitpicky detail question. And what goes wrong for students when they haven't read the passage properly, anchored in purpose, anchored in connections between paragraphs, anchored in point of view, they kind of go hunting around for that little detail, and then they really struggle to get the question right. So I'm not going to melt your face off today. These are all kind of moderately difficult. I'd say kind of 600 to 700 level questions, nothing outlandish. But I think the two passages are kind of interesting in different ways as far as how they can kind of throw you off. Not super hard passages, but just have some interesting elements to them. I'll say more about that as we go on, especially with the first one today. All right. With that, I think we just jump right in. Yeah, we're going to talk about something is wrong here. We're going to talk about plant resins. All right, go ahead and take a moment, guys. 2 paragraphs here. So as always in these videos, first paragraph, go ahead and think about what's the purpose, what's the author going after, what can you extract from this. If you're watching live, great to see some familiar people already here. As soon as you have kind of your little summary of the purpose or why this paragraph is here, please punch it in the chat. Helps everybody, helps the non-live viewers a whole bunch. All right, go ahead and take a moment. And I'll get rid of that banner. Give me just a moment. All right, if you're not watching live, you need another minute, go ahead and take it. Live group, as always, I'm going to keep hounding you guys because I really value the chatter, I really value the feedback. If you guys are making mistakes with this, it helps everybody. So please let me know what you're thinking. Let me know what you're pulling from the paragraphs. Helps everybody enormously. All right. As always, we want to really, really fight for what's the author's point of view here. Do we have anything like that? Part of what I like about this passage, part of why I chose it is I think it's a little bit hard to see that. And we've given you passages in this series where it's like, hey, here's 5 points of view, and they hit you in the face with it. This isn't one of those, right? I think it's a little bit more subtle. All right. So paragraph 1, really kind of the heart of what's going on here is it's just talking about the confusion surrounding resin. And do we see the author's point of view I think it's really hard to see there. I think it's basically just saying that, hey, there's been confusion about resin for a long time. Resin, I suppose amber as well. So amber is just fossilized resin. Pliny thought he knew what this was all about. I think I'm having some more technical issues here. I think I'm having some focus issues. Sorry for the technical stuff, you guys. We're having a hard time with the Facebook feed. Whoa, okay. That should be better. I'm having some camera issues here too, so apologies for that. Okay, so confusion around the resin, around amber, which is the fossilized version of it. Pliny seemed to have the right idea that it's something that comes from trees, but then people are studying amber as if it's a rock, which it isn't. And then in general, it's confused with these other two things. So I guess the confusion around resin specifically is that it's confused with gum and sap. Gum and sap. And it seems like kind of where the author's headed. And it's a little hard to tell again, because we don't see the author's opinion in any sort of clear way here. That it's kind of saying, well, hey, these two have a physiological function. But interestingly, resin does not, or doesn't have a clear one. What's the exact language there? So they have not yet determined a physiological function of resin. So they understand what gum and sap do, right? So gum is a response to bacterial infections. Sap is something that is a solution that's transported through plant tissues, but resin, I don't know what it's for. So we'll say unclear function. All right. So if you're a little uncomfortable with this, just in the sense that, well, wait a minute, I don't really know the author's point. Yeah, you're not alone. And I think that's normal. It's something you're going to feel on maybe, I don't know, 10, 20% of passages. That first paragraph, you're going to go, I don't know, I've read a bunch of stuff. There's some facts here. Seems to add up to something, right? There's a lot of confusion around what resin is and what it isn't. They compare it to gum and sap. We know what those do. We don't even know what resin does. Okay, great. I'm seeing pretty good stuff from the live group. Thank you so much for this, everybody. And there is a wonderful question, Yo-chan, and apologies for mispronunciations here. Let me address that after we cover the second paragraph here. So let me give you guys another minute or so. Paragraph number 2. We'll come back. This is the end of the passage here. We'll come back, analyze this, and then I'll address some big picture stuff about RC, getting some great questions about that. And as always, if you need more time with this, go ahead and hit that pause button. If you're not watching live, group, thank you so much. I'm seeing some good stuff coming out of you guys. Really appreciate it. And again, a really good big picture question we'll hit in just a moment about how reading comp works on the adaptive GMAT. Okay, second and final paragraph here. So as always, anchor in the previous paragraphs. It's what really helps you to kind of see the structure, see how the author's kind of spinning their overall story here, building up their argument. So again, paragraph one of those kind of uncomfortable duds where it just kind of feels like a blob of facts. You're not going to see that very often, but here it is. There's confusion about resin, how it works, what it is. We don't know the physiological function. Okay, so this, I would argue this paragraph is all about kind of saying, well, here's possibilities, right? So here's, theories of resin function. And it kind of goes beyond that, I suppose, to kind of talk about chemical ecology. We'll get to that in just a moment. So it kind of takes you through a little bit of the history. So it's kind of saying, well, 1950s, so there's kind of a theory that the resin may repel insects or attract them. You got this guy, Frankel, who comes along and kind of says, well, hey, it was a chemical response to an attack, but then later maybe some of the insects kind of evolved to become attracted to it. So this idea that, hey, the resin may repel insects, but then it might attract them. And then that kind of led to this whole idea. Later researchers are kind of saying, well, hey, maybe it mediates this coevolution of plants and animals. Okay, that's pretty interesting. So coevolution. And then even later, this led to chemical ecology as a field of study. Okay, so what does all this add up to? I mean, I think it's fine on one hand to kind of say, well, hey, we can kind of say first paragraph, confusion around the function of resin. We don't really know what it is. There's confusion about amber. Here's what gum and sap do. We don't really know what resin does. And this is about kind of what, how does resin function or what have we learned from it? But I think it's kind of interesting that it never actually says this is exactly what it does. It's kind of presenting it all as a theory. Okay, in the 1950s, entomologists posited, so they suggested that this might be true. So Frankel conjectured that this might be true. So later researchers started to study it as a coevolution thing, but never said exactly what it does. They just know that that's, a thing. They suggested it. And then we kind of got into this discipline that grew out of all of this, of chemical ecology. Interesting. Do we see the author's point of view? Not necessarily. Now, I want to pick on, and again, I pick on you guys out of live group. I love it when you guys pop stuff in here. So I'm going to pick on some of these that I think are interesting because I think they're great. Presented a variety of point of views. Be a little careful with that because are these, I wouldn't say that's incorrect, but be a little bit careful because to me, these sound like a bunch of different theories that are being posited. Are they points of view exactly? I think we could debate. So again, I want you thinking in terms of point of view. Who's saying what? But I think there's a little bit of a subtle thing I just want you to key in on here, which is these are theories that the researchers are throwing out there, basically. And that's it. So subtle difference. And again, in shorthand, it's really hard to capture a lot of nuance in these little notes and these little things in chat or in your notes when you're taking the test. So you might very well be on the right track. I just want you to be a little bit careful. Are these opinions they're presenting or are they theories? There's a subtle difference there in terms of the meaning. Okay. Before we get into the questions here, there's a question that came up that I think is great. And guys, this is why we do this live. I want you guys to fire this stuff at us because if you're asking this, I know plenty of other people are curious about this. So for my conversation with GMAC, and if you're not familiar with it, so I filmed a series of 10 videos. Took about 15 months to do 10 videos with GMAC, the people who create this lovely test that you're all studying for. And I spoke with some of their psychometricians. I spoke with some of their test security people, accommodations, about all of these topics, trying to get GMAC to open up about things. Psychometricians are the people who handle sort of how does the exam work? How does the algorithm work? How does scoring work? So we did 3 videos in conjunction with them, and they opened up about all kinds of stuff. One of the things was what this question is about. So when you see a reading comp passage on the exam, it's actually going to come with either 3 or 4 questions. You will see either typically 3 or 4 reading comprehension passages on your verbal section. Each one of those will have 3 or 4 questions attached to it. Now, I think where this question is coming from is those 4 questions do not adapt from question to question. So when it's time for you to see a reading comp passage, and let's say that you're at a 600 level, it will find you a set of 3 or 4 reading comprehension questions that are roughly at the 600 level. But that's never going to be perfect, and there's always going to be some variety within those questions. So if you miss the first reading comprehension question of a set of 3, it will not adapt for the second question. It's just a group of 3 or 4 questions that are fixed and static based on how you're performing before you see it. So bottom line here is it adapts before you see that set of reading comprehension questions. It does not adapt within it, and the difficulty level won't be perfectly uniform among those questions. So let's suppose that you're around a 600 level as you go into that reading comprehension passage. The questions will be on average around 600, but there's going to be some variety there. They might range from, I don't know, 500 to 700 or 550 to 650. So you will see some variety of difficulty level even within a passage. Okay, hope that helped a bit. A little bit technical on the scoring bits. All right, any other big questions here? Dino, thank you again, Dino. Always really appreciate your thoughts in here. I think this one's debatable too. I think that's something the author does. I actually agree with you, is that the heart of what the author is doing. That's unclear to me. I think the passage is more about, hey, we were confused about resin and we're trying to figure out what it does. And hey, look at this cool thing. It sort of led to this whole new field. So I would agree this is part of what the author does here, but I don't think that's the main purpose. I think that's part of the relevance of this whole discussion of resin. I wouldn't say that's the heart of it. And again, not clear to me if that's what you're saying or not. All right, let's get into some questions, you guys. This is all about function and role questions. I'm just going to give you 2 off of this passage. Go ahead and take a moment, live group. As soon as you've got something, please pop it in the chat. If you're lost, please tell me that you're lost. That's helpful too. Right, as always, pause if you need to. Great, live group. Thank you. I'm seeing lots of chatter. Makes me happy. If you're struggling on this one, keep those comments coming in. It's super helpful for us. All right, author refers to bacterial infections, most likely in order to. So why is this here? Is it to describe the physiological function that gum performs in plants? Yeah, that's exactly what it's there for. So resin's confused with gum. What does gum do? It's produced in response to bacterial infections. So yeah, it's describing that. I'm going to hang on to A. Now, if you've watched the rest of the videos in this series, you're almost certainly going to nail this, because part of what we talked about is when something feels too obvious, hey, if it's right, it's right. Don't question it too much. This feels too obvious. It feels uninteresting. It doesn't feel anchored in the big picture. It feels like we just read about resin. And now here's this little nitpicky thing about gum, but is this why it's mentioned? Sure, why not? I'm going to go through the rest of them just in case something's somehow better. B, demonstrate that sap is not the only substance transported through a plant's tissues. Not at all, because we don't know how exactly gum is transported. So that has nothing to do with it. Why am I writing that on Q2? So B is out for Q1. C, explain how modern chemical analysis has been used to clarify the function of resin. Not at all. So this is something we're learning about gum, not something we're learning about resin here. Contrasts what we don't know about resin, but this doesn't do anything to clarify the function of resin exactly. D, show that gum cannot serve as an effective defense of herbivores. That has nothing to do with anything we're talking about. There's a whole thing in here about resin and its function repelling herbivores, but nothing about gum doing that. And you give an example of how confusion has arisen with regard to the nature of resin. Not quite, maybe a little bit tempting. And by the way, a huge chunk of people actually pick E typically on this one. And I'm not seeing that mistake a whole lot with live groups, so you guys deserve a cookie. because the fact that gum fights bacterial infection really has nothing. It's not an example of confusion about resin. It's an example, I suppose, of the lack of confusion about gum and sap, but that doesn't give us an example of why we're confused about resin. So even though E feels like it's more anchored in the rest of the passage, it has nothing to do with why bacterial infections were actually mentioned here. So A is our answer. Awesome work, everybody. Wow, live group. Nice. Nice. You guys are crushing it. All right. And by the way, not an easy question. This is, I would say, about, I think 35 to 40% of students miss this. So awesome to see you guys crushing it. Makes me happy. All right. Second and final question, and then we'll move on to another passage. Pause if you need to. Live group. If you're struggling on this one, please just let me know. Hey, I'm lost. Got somebody. Thank you so much for this. I always appreciate this kind of thing. C, but I'm not real sure. Thank you. That just helps us know where your heads are at. Really like this. Okay, got another C there. This is great. All right. So, author of the passage refers to Pliny in order to do what? Okay, so that's that second sentence, right? So we've got this whole thing in the first paragraph, right? It's all about, hey, we're confused. We're confused. People think that amber is actually a semi-precious gem. It's not. It derives from resin. We don't really know what resin is. We don't know what it does. It's confused with gum or sap, but it doesn't have the same function. We don't know what the function is. Okay, but what does Pliny actually say? So although counterpoint of some sort here, although Pliny in the first century, so a long, long time ago, recognized that amber was produced from marrow discharged from trees. Okay, so Pliny was acknowledging that amber somehow was produced from something that came out of trees, marrow, resin. Okay, Pliny kind of had it right. That's interesting. But it's still been the case that most people have been wrong about it. Amber has been widely misunderstood to be a semi-precious gem, but Pliny actually seemed to have gotten it right. So why is the author saying this? Give an example of how the nature of amber has been misunderstood in the past. No, Pliny didn't misunderstand the nature of amber, interestingly. So A is out. B, show that confusion has long been more pervasive than confusion about resin. No, there's confusion about both, right? That's pretty clear in here. So B is out. C, make note of the first known reference to amber as a semi-precious gem. Yeah, and we're seeing some of the live group picking this one. Seeing lots of variety, actually. I'm seeing some A, I'm seeing some C, I'm seeing some D. This is great. But this is tempting, but we don't know that Pliny was the first, right? In the first century, meaning around the time, a little bit after the time of Christ, so in the years before 100 AD, but was he the first one to make reference to it? I don't know. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. So C is out. D, point out an exception to the generalization about the history of understanding. Yeah. And that word, although, so back up for a second here. I'm always harping on you guys, like, what does it mean to read in an engaged way? What does it mean to read for structure? It's really obvious to some people. Sometimes it's helpful to just keep in mind. Sometimes these pivot words, sometimes we make too big of a deal out of them. But something like although, sometimes it's easy to blow past it. Although, here comes the exception, and then here's our main point about Amber. Amber has been widely misunderstood, even though this guy a long time ago had it. So this is an exception, right? It's very clear in that structural language with the although that it is an exception. So D is looking pretty good. E demonstrate that Pliny believed amber to be a mineral. Very much the opposite, right? He knew that it came from something that came out of trees, resin, marrow, whatever you want to call it. All right. Yeah. Okay. And this is a tough one. So I forget the exact stats on this, but it's a third to a half of people get it wrong. Yeah. So by the way, this is totally fair game. So being a great test taker, being awesome at this exam, sometimes you don't like or don't really understand the right answer. But did you know that A, B, C, and E were wrong? Were you comfortable there? And you looked at D and went, was that why we did this? I don't know. Well, it must be if you were really confident eliminating the other three. That's why you always see me do this religiously. I'm always using process elimination. And there will be moments, unless you're absolutely incredible at this, there will be moments where you're holding your nose and picking an answer you're uncomfortable with because the other four are clearly terrible. So if that's what you're doing, awesome. Awesome. That totally works. Good testing. All right. That is it for our guy Pliny for today. Pliny was the only person in there. That's it for resin. Oh yeah, this thing, by the way. So if you're enjoying this, you want more, we've got smarter people than me who work at GMAT Ninja, free video course, quant data insights, verbal, all that. Come see us online. There's things you want to see in our videos. Just tag us in the comments and we will do our best to help out. Totally free. If you really love it, can donate to some of our favorite charities. All right, with that, passage number 2 for today. I think a little tougher, I don't know, you can judge. 3 paragraphs, early trading companies. First paragraph, go and do the usual thing. Take a look. Once you've got something live group, please let me know. Do you see a purpose? What do you see in here? Give me your little summary as soon as you're ready. If you need more time, hit that pause button. Live group, even as I start yapping about this, please let me know what you're thinking here. So what do you kind of see as the heart of this? Really curious to see what you guys are pulling out of it. All right. Part of why I picked these particular 2 passages for today's lesson, obviously some of it is, hey, it's a video on function and role questions, which by the way are about 15% or so of all reading comp questions. So I picked 2 passages that have a couple of those. Okay, cool. I also picked passages that, we've been talking about point of view, we've been talking about purpose. I picked passages on purpose where they obscure that a little bit, or it's not clear what the author's point of view is. I think those are a little bit harder to read sometimes in some ways, and you still want to fight for it. but sometimes it's hard to see the structure. I think this is another good case of it. And this paragraph in particular, I really like because it's like, as an example of what the GMAT does, I really like it because I think it does a very subtle thing where it looks like a wall of facts, but it's not. Okay. Here's what, if you're reading a little bit superficially and you're reading for facts, or all you're absorbing really is the facts, here's what you're going to get out of this. So the modern multinational corporation, is originated when in the 19th century. So we'll just say modern multinational. Multinational corporation originated in the 19th century. And I'm going to put a star there. I'll come back to it. Okay, fine. And how did that happen? Well, they give us some details on what exactly made all that happen. So owner managers were replaced by salaried managers. Owner managers replaced by salaried. We have this change in volume. So there's an increase in volume of commercial activity. So that's what caused the change. So more volume caused sort of that change to salaried people working in hierarchical structures. And hey, the 16th and 17th century ones, these older multinational trading companies, these chartered trading companies, even though they were national, no, irrelevant to the discussion, right? Volume's too low. So 16th, 17th century trading companies, irrelevant. Okay. Now, why did I start those two things? I'm just going through your comments real quick, because now they're coming in, guys. I appreciate that. Yeah, this is fun. Here's recreational amount of comparison, rethinking. Okay. Notice the language in these two references in the actual passage. So it doesn't say the modern multinational corporation originated when the owner managers of 19th century British firms did this. Is described as having originated. Described by who? Right? The author is using very, very specific language there. And I think it's really interesting. The author's being kind of Weasley. These people over there describe it as having originated. Well, that's interesting. Look at that second sentence. Increases in the volume of transactions in such firms are commonly believed to have necessitated. Are common by who? I don't know. Apparently not the author. And then look at that end. So this whole business of, oh, they're considered irrelevant. Considered irrelevant. Usually considered relevant to this discussion. The volume is assumed to have been too low. Do we think the author agrees that this is the right way of analyzing it? I don't know. But there is a really deliberate thing going on here where it's all of this weird kind of passive language around, these people over here believe this stuff. Okay. That's interesting. So I just want you, when we talk about structure, we talk about point of view, and I always kind of use the phrase, oh, fight for the point of view, fight for the structure. That's the kind of thing I mean. Look at how exactly this is phrased. It's really deliberate. You have 4 different phrases in there where it's not stating this as fact. It's stating this as things some mysterious people out there believe. Really, really interesting. And yeah, and I think some of you guys are kind of picking up on where I'm headed here. Yeah, and I think you're spot on. I think this is 100% correct. I've also read the passage, but spoiler alert, I would be a little careful with this because you don't want to bias yourself. I think you want to notice what's happening here, which is a lot of weird passive voice. We don't know who believes these things. It is not the author saying that he or she believes it. What exactly is the author going to do? There's really not a lot of value in anticipating that, because what if we're wrong? What if it's something, because I don't want you to hallucinate things. Sometimes our expectations changes what we see in the reading. Big time, we see that in critical reasoning. We'll talk about that in future videos in more detail. But I'd be a little careful with that because sometimes your anticipation can cause you to misread. In this case, you happen to be spot on. Spoiler alert. All right, go ahead and have the second paragraph. 3 paragraphs here. Go ahead and take a moment with this second one. And again, live group, let me know as soon as you have thoughts on it. All right, pause if you need to. Live group, keep the comments coming. Yeah, starting to see Dino. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you chiming in quickly on all this stuff. It's great. Okay, pretty simple here. And again, I'm not quite. I'm only seeing your tag names on here. So Kav Pro. Apologies for mispronunciations. So yeah, I mean, spot on. I mean, that anticipation of what's happening was correct. Careful of the anticipation. But yeah, what's this saying? Like, if the first paragraph is saying, well, those old trading companies, those old charter trading companies were considered to be irrelevant because the volumes were assumed to be too low. Well, basically here, no. They're very relevant. They're very relevant to this discussion of how did modern corporations evolve. And in particular, there's large volumes. So large volumes of trading activities. And that created this need, right, to start organizing people into hierarchical management structures. And they're salaried agents. So large volumes, salaried managers, we'll just say salaried people in hierarchies. That's exactly what the first paragraph was getting into, right? So, hey, what is it that, when do we say that a modern multinational corporation started? Well, it was these firms in the 19th century that started to hire salaried managers instead of owner managers, put them into hierarchies because the trading volumes were really high. Well, that's exactly what the author is saying about the 16th and 17th century chartered trading companies. Large volumes, salaried managers, organized into hierarchies. All right, there we go. So maybe that was where the modern multinational actually originated. It doesn't say that explicitly, but it's certainly evidence to support that idea that at the very least they're relevant to the conversation. First paragraph says it is assumed that they're irrelevant. Second paragraph, author's like, dude, yeah, they're relevant. There's something there. All right. I want to pick on some of these a little bit. Dino, as always, huge appreciation for all the participation. And you bring up a lot of, you have a really good way of bringing up things that I know some other people are thinking. And when you put it in shorthand here, it kind of, whether or not you're thinking the right way, because I think sometimes you are, it captures something that I see people doing that causes them trouble. You might be taking this just a tiny bit too far. The 16th century companies were the reason for what? It is the reason for developing the multinational corporations. I wouldn't go quite that far, right? They're relevant, but the author's not quite going so far as to say, oh, they're the reason. Maybe the author thinks that. We don't know yet. The author is clearly saying they're relevant. I think we're very comfortable saying that these characteristics of the 19th century precursors to the modern multinational corporation, a lot of those characteristics were present in those old trading companies. Were they the reason multinationals evolved? Maybe taking it too far. So just be careful in that shorthand, because that might be just adding something that's maybe putting a little bit too much in the author's mouth. And again, when you do it in shorthand like this, sometimes you're not saying exactly what you're thinking. But I love these. These are super helpful, because there are people on this passage that will say that and take it too far. And I just want you to be careful not to go beyond what the author said here. All right. Seeing some great other comments here. I think that's probably a good place to move on. Yeah, great. Cav Pro, yeah, perfect. This is spot on. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Doing awesome. Third and final paragraph. Go and take a minute. All right, as always, pause if you need to. I'm gonna go ahead and jump in. Um, yeah, thank you again, live group. Super appreciative. You guys are awesome with all the chatter participation today. Um, yes, I think that's a true statement. I'm going to take it a little further, though. I think, and I want to push you a little bit to just always think in terms of but why? Why did the author say that? I think that's right. So the early ones organized effectively. I think that's right. Depending on what you mean by effectively, are there differences between modern multinationals and those early charter trading companies? Yes. Are there similarities? Yes. But for extra points, why? Why is the author saying that? And I think you kind of start to see it like really kind of at the end, like why is the author saying all this? It's like, hey, and again, we're always trying to connect to previous paragraphs. That helps keep you anchored and really to understand that final paragraph really well. It helps to kind of remind yourself, well, why was the author writing the first couple? Just to recap, paragraph 1, all of this weird passive language. Oh, the assumption is that modern multinationals started in the 19th century. These early trading companies were irrelevant. The volume was assumed to be too low. No, they're relevant. And now what's the author saying? Hey, there's differences. For sure. But they still merit study. So merit further study as analogs of more modern structures. So if we're asking the question, okay, how do we understand the history or where modern multinational companies came from? The author's saying, hey, wait a minute, these are relevant. Are they perfect? No. What are those differences? They've got a whole bunch of them in there, right? So it's pre-industrial. So it's peasant labor doing stuff, right? They're connected to national interests. So national governments, national interests. The managers, the top managers were still part owners. I'll just say managers still owned, which is less common in modern multinationals. So certainly differences, but the differences alone aren't the point, right? So there are key differences, but we should be paying attention to these because they have enough similarities that they're really interesting analogs to the modern multinational. And that's where we start to see the heart of it. I am not going to throw the primary purpose question at you here because this is about functions and roles anchored in that primary purpose. But that, I think, is where we really see, why did the author write this? What does the author want? There it is, right? So it's, hey, these are relevant. They've been forgotten. They've been ignored because we think that modern multinationals really started in the 19th century. But these old chartered trading companies, a lot of commonalities. Yes, some differences, enough commonalities. We should be paying attention. All right. And yeah, Dino nailed it. I think if you're going to keep this to 9 words, I think that's excellent. Yeah, Maria, as always, awesome. Love this. All right, thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate all this from the live group. Yeah, 3 questions on this one. So here comes question number 1. Go and take a moment. All right. See, a little bit of hesitation from the live group. Starting to see some consensus now, but okay. So why is the author listing the various activities of the early chartered trading companies? That's all in second paragraph. Why is that happening? So all these things they did in that very first sentence of the second paragraph, why is that there? Well, the very next sentence, well, so two ways to think about it. One is, well, the whole point of all this, right? All this stuff we talked about is, well, why are they relevant? So first paragraph, these mysterious people that are never named dismiss the early charter trading companies as irrelevant to the conversation. Why? Because the volume is assumed to be too low. And then what do you have in that second paragraph? Okay, here's all the things they did. Look at all these things they did. Very next sentence, that second sentence, the large volume of those transactions seems to have necessitated hierarchical structure. So that's exactly, so the fact that those activities tell us that there was a large enough volume to sort of create the need for these hierarchical structures that define or part of the definition of a modern multinational. Okay. So is it A, analyze the various ways in which these activities contributed to changes in the management structure in such companies? Well, no, it's not talking about various ways that these activities contributed to changes. It's just saying, hey, look at all these activities. It led to an increased volume, and that's what catalyzed the change. There's no various ways that these individual activities changed the way the operation was run. So A might be really tempting. I don't think that's a terrible one, but it's not correct because it's not talking about the various ways it did these things. B, demonstrate that the volume of business transactions of such companies exceeded that of earlier firms. Also, arguably kind of tempting, but that's not it because we're not comparing it to earlier firms at all, right? If anything, we're comparing it to later firms and saying, no, actually, it's a high enough volume to kind of matter in terms of structural complexity, but definitely not comparing it to previous ones. C, refute the view that the volume of business undertaken by such companies is relatively low. Yeah, again, if you're thinking structurally, as you read the whole thing, these purpose, these function, these role questions are way easier because the whole business is, yeah, these mystery people think that the volume was too low and these old corporations, these old trading companies are relevant, but no, the volume was high. It's important. That's exactly what this is doing. So I'm going to keep C. D, emphasize the international scope of the operations. Tempting, but not quite. When you think about what that's really there for, and you think about kind of what immediately follows it, yes, it was a large volume of transactions that were a lot of this was international in nature. But if you're tempted by this, notice that even up in that first paragraph. So if you look at, let's see, we've got the third to last line of the first paragraph. So these old charter trading companies, despite the international scope of their activities, were considered to have volume that was too low, assumed to have volume that was too low to be relevant to this discussion. So it doesn't really matter that these are international. That was something that everybody kind of understood. The author's mentioning this laundry list of things they did specifically to say, no, but the volume was high. And that's why these are reasonable, relevant analogs to a modern multinational. So subtle, but for that reason, we can get rid of D. And E, support the argument that such firms coordinated activities using available means of communication and transport. I mean, I suppose they must have, but that's really not the core purpose, right? Why is this here? It's to help build the author's argument that so the second paragraph's all about making this argument. These charter trading companies are relevant. It has nothing to do with whether they coordinated by available means of communication and transport. Of course they did. It's there to say, no, these companies were big enough with enough volume of transactions to really matter in this conversation. So E is out and C is our winner. Tough one. Saw a lot of variety among the live group. All right. Told us to be some tough guys in here. Not the hardest of the hard. I think I've thrown worse at you in this series, but these are pretty tough because you really have to be anchored in that big picture of why each paragraph is there to get it. These are tough. All right. Next question is actually not a functional role question. It's an inference question, but I think it's a good one. So go and take a moment. And pause if you need to. I'm going to move pretty quickly through these last couple, just because we're running a little bit low on time. Okay. Believe it or not, this is the hard, statistically, in terms of how many people miss it, this is the hardest question of this passage, including some of the ones attached to this passage that I didn't include in the video. And I think, I have a feeling most of the live group watching, you were probably here for our video on inferences. I never want you to overthink that word. It's the single most common kind of easy mistake people make. It can be inferred. Oh no, but it's stated. If it feels too obvious, sometimes people discard it. Pick the one that is the most right. Find the one that is most true. That is it. And again, if you're anchored in the big picture, very much like on these function and role questions, the inference questions are easier. It can be inferred from the passage that the author would characterize the activities engaged in by these companies as being A, complex enough in scope to require substantial planning and coordination by management. That's the whole point of everything we just read, right? Is exactly that these merit study for this reason. So you almost, we're still going to go through all five. Be careful. Maybe I misread A, but man, A is looking like exactly the whole thing we just talked about in analyzing this. So again, the single most missed question on here, close to half of students miss this question. And it is so easy if you're anchored in the big picture and really connecting purpose. B, too simple to be considered similar to those of modern multinational. No, author's whole point is it's worth studying as an analog. Is it exact? No, but there's enough going on there. It's worth thinking about when you're studying modern multinationals. C, as intricate as those carried out by the largest multinationals? No. That whole third paragraph, yes, there are differences. They're not exactly the same. D, often unprofitable. That's not the point at all. Certainly not even something that was stated. E, hampered by the political demands imposed by them. Maybe it mentions that there are political demands, right? That they're not necessarily political, but serving the interests of the home country, but hampered by the political demands. That's going too far. All right, that's it. A is our winner, and seriously, statistically, this is the hardest one by a good bit on this one, and saw the live group for the most part to slice right through it. Okay. Last question, 5 minutes. Go ahead and give you a moment on this. Pause if you need to. I'm laughing. Louis, sorry, Mr. in the video. This will be on YouTube forever. Every Friday, same time we're here. Maybe some weirdness depending where you're in the world because daylight saving, sometimes the time zones change or whatever. But yeah, Fridays, let's see, 8 o'clock Pacific time, 11 o'clock US Eastern time. Every week until you guys get tired of me, I'll be here. Part of why I say that is if there's something you want to see in future videos, please let us know in the comments. Please let us know soon. We're trying to figure out the direction of our Friday series. We might do some more reading comp right out of the gate. We might start critical reasoning next week. So if you have a preference, please let us know. Louis, great to see you. Sorry I missed the first chunk. All right, final question here. Why does the author mention the artisan and peasant production systems of early trading companies? Well, that's all this business in the third and final paragraph. Where the author's not saying these charter trading companies are exactly like modern multinationals, saying, hey, there's differences. What are they? Well, one of them are these pre-industrial artisan peasant means of production. So that's a way that they differ. Still, we're studying these early charter trading companies, you bet. But there's a difference there between what happened, and this is an example of that. So is this mentioned as an example of an area of operations of these companies that was unhampered by the communication and transport? Nothing about that, whether these ways of producing things were hampered by systems of communications and transport. B, a similarity that allows fruitful comparison. No, this is a difference that limits the comparison. The comparison is still worth making, still worth studying, but it's a limitation, so B is out. See a positive achievement of these companies in the face of various difficulties? Not at all. It's discussed specifically as a difference between these old and these newer ones. D, a system that could not have emerged in the absence of management hierarchies. Not at all. This is the old pre-industrial ways of producing things, had nothing to do with the management hierarchies. Those emerged kind of in spite of these old ways of producing things. And E, characteristic that distinguishes these from modern multinationals. Absolutely. That's not how we produce stuff anymore. And there's our answer. All right, guys. You have survived lesson number 4, episode 4, 2026, reading comp, functions and roles. Again, if there's anything else you guys want to see in these videos, please let us know. Especially in the next few days, we're going to be discussing between now and Monday what exactly we're doing next week. Not sure if it's going to be more reading comp or more critical reasoning, but I will be here. I guarantee that. 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 o'clock Eastern, live on Fridays for the foreseeable future until you guys get tired of me. So if you like this, please tell a friend, have them come live. Love having the chatter. Those of you, especially folks that I've been seeing week after week, really, really, really appreciate it. All right, that's it. Have a great week, everybody, and have fun studying.